And we're live. What's up, everybody? Wanted to get together for a chat. Haven't done a live stream in a while, so if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Hey, Bobby World. Hopefully the audio and video look good. I haven't done a live stream, like I said, in a while, so let me know if the audio and video looks good. We can talk about pretty much anything you want to talk about. I've got some cameras, if you want to talk about cameras. I took this Osmo Pocket to Disney, did a video on it. Got this Fuji X-H1. Got a bunch of different stuff we can talk about. So let me know what you'd like to talk about. Didn't really have any planned, no spiel, no nothing, just wanted to get together and try to do some chatting. So if you're in the chat, say hello, let me know. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Hey, Marco. I don't know why they switched to micro HDMI, but I do have the Sony a6500 here as my second camera. I think it's probably more to save space and maybe some cost, but probably space. If you look at the a6500, it's a pretty small camera. Not a lot of room for the mini or full-size HDMI ports. I don't own a camera with a full-size. I think the Nikon has a mini HDMI, but pretty much all the cameras I own, this Fuji is actually the X-H1 is a micro. The Sony a6500, maybe the a7 III, I'd have to check. Bobby World, you've got an M50. How do you charge with a power bank while traveling? I don't have the M50, but I think there's a micro USB connection in there. I think you probably just plug it in and charge it with a power bank. I'm not sure. I know that's what I do with my a6500 because the battery life is horrible with that a6500. So I just plug mine in with a micro USB cable, and it seems to work fine for charging and playing. I'm not sure about the M50. I'm possibly looking into an M50, but at this point I don't have one. Let me see, I don't have... The only other Canon camera I have is an SL2, and I'm not sure about that. I could grab it and see. Marco, you can't find any short HDMI to HDMI adapters that are compatible with your a6000. I don't know. I'm using cables that are micro to full-size HDMI, and they're like 6 feet. I have some, I think I got them on Amazon. They were fairly inexpensive. Actually, they might be more like 3 feet. I'm not sure, Marco, if that's what you were asking. I've got the, I think they're, if you want to go from HDMI to micro, there are cables out there that you can find on Amazon. And I don't have the links handy, but I can probably find the link for the ones that I have. They seem to work pretty well. And they were fairly inexpensive. Actually, I'm using 2 of them right now for my a6500 and for my Fuji to plug into my capture cards. And I've had some other full HDMI to micro cables that just didn't work very well. In fact, I think they broke after maybe a couple of days, but these ones seem to work pretty well. I'll see if I can find a link. If I can find that link, I'll put it in this video once I post it live. Also, I did recently take the Osmo Pocket, which I've really grown to love. This tiny little thing. And if you follow me on Instagram, or if you follow me on Twitter, I think you've probably seen some of the time lapses. Took some photos and took some time lapses and some video at Walt Disney World with this little camera. And actually, since I did that, there's an upgrade that came out, a firmware update that came out that makes it even better. Now you don't need the phone. Previously, you needed the phone to be able to do Pro Mode. Now you don't need the phone. They've also just made it easier to use. And I think probably they've added support. If they didn't in this firmware update, they're going to add support for an external microphone, which is what I'm hoping for. You can plug an external microphone adapter into your USB-C adapter. But I found this to be a really, really great travel camera. Again, there's a video, I think it's the last video I did on the channel about this as a travel camera. Plenty of great features. You can do regular 180 panos, you can do 3x3 panos, you can do regular time lapse, you can do motion time lapse. It does really, really good with video, I think. In low light, it's not too bad. But I think this is for $350, again, you might have to buy some accessories for it, but I think that's a really great travel camera. I wouldn't have any problems. In fact, probably when I go back to Disney next time, I'll take that with me as my only camera. It's not going to get you as great photos as as maybe an A6500 or Fuji X-T3 would. I've heard that the Osmo Pocket is working on live streaming. I don't know yet. I haven't seen anything, but it shouldn't be that difficult for them to add Facebook and possibly Twitter and even Instagram and YouTube live streaming. It's probably more a software thing than a hardware thing. There's probably some software that you can get that will allow you to do that. I've looked into some other software. We could plug an A6500, let's say, into your phone and use that for live streaming. But I think that they're working on it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mimo app for the Osmo Pocket comes out pretty soon with a solution to be able to live stream, at least to Facebook. And I did recently get this Fuji X-H1, which I've got the Fuji X-T3. It's actually filming us right now. This is very similar to the X-T2, but it's got image stabilization built into it's called IBIS, basically built into the sensor. And I bought the 16mm lens, which is currently filming us right now. And I took that out around town, and I have another Instagram kind of for my photography stuff called Bull City Pictures. And if you follow me on Instagram and Twitter for Bull City Pictures, you'll see some of the pictures that this camera took. I just took it out. This is the first time I've taken it out. It's a pretty good camera, actually. The IBIS is a little bit noisy. You can kind of hear it. And I didn't really shoot any video with it, but in video you might be able to hear that IBIS. But for photos, man, it's pretty solid. That 16mm lens is not image stabilized, so the IBIS definitely helps. Marco, you don't like your voice. Marco, I use Audacity, and you can change a lot of things about your audio if you want to do that in post-processing. That's the application that I use basically to process my audio. Right now, I'm not using that obviously, but if you listen to my videos, I do use Audacity. I don't really do a lot to it, but I do know that there are lots of things that you can change about the audio using Audacity. Again, it's a free application that you can download to your PC, and I think it's great. Carbon 6. Have I had any problems with the 150 to 600? I really haven't. I think we chatted about this. I shoot on the Nikon D7100, and that Sigma 150 to 600 has been rock solid, and the pictures that I'm getting from it, even at really low shutter speeds, have been really, really sharp. I don't know if the Canon 6D has anything to do with it. I know that it's got fewer megapixels than the D7100, but I don't know. does it seem like it's maybe front focusing or back focusing, or does it just seem like there's really nothing in focus? I'm surprised. It might just be a bad copy because that lens has been stellar for me. Oh yeah. Cloudy days or in the shadows, really, I generally don't shoot or try not to shoot birds specifically or wildlife when it's cloudy. I really don't think you get great photos for wildlife. I really think that hard light gives you the best photos when you're talking about wildlife. I know obviously for portraits, and there are other cases where you might want that kind of soft light and that diffused light, but I think what you're seeing might be normal if you're doing it on cloudy days. You can bring that ISO up, but then you're seeing softer images because you have a higher ISO. I think I try to shoot primarily just on, on days that are fairly sunny here, and keep that ISO below 400 on the D7100, which is a fairly old or oldish. I don't know if it's newer or older than the 6D, but some of the older cameras can't really handle the higher ISO. So I keep my ISO under 400. Try to keep your shutter speed with that lens, with iOS on, above 125, even at 600 millimeters. Keep it as high as you can, but even at 125 and 1/60th, I've gotten some pretty good shots on a sunny day. I think the key is to just get those sunny days. Although, having said that, I do have some shots of the birds in the snow with that 150 to 600 that seem to be good. That's interesting. Carbon. I don't know atmosphere certainly plays a part as well, but if you're taking these shots in the wintertime now, it shouldn't really be, the atmosphere shouldn't be too heavy. It should usually be fairly clear. I don't know, when you use your 6D, if you have another longish lens, do you see issues with those lenses? Or is that the only lens you use to take pictures of birds and wildlife? But I really only keep my D7100 around because I have that 150 to 600 lens, and it's stellar. So you don't have other telephoto lenses? And those Rokinon and Canon lenses, I'm assuming, are more wide angle and maybe mid-tele. And you're not, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Like you said, like I've said too, I think it's probably just more related to the weather. If you've got soft light for wildlife, in my opinion, you're going to get soft pictures, which again is good if you're doing portraits, but for wildlife, I like a nice hard light and I like it to be sunny. Get some of those good shots. In fact, let me see if I can dig up a picture of, a couple of pictures from that lens. I really find that it's an amazingly sharp lens, actually. This is a picture of a cardinal that I ended up getting with that lens. Now, I was fairly close. The distance to the subject also makes a difference. But I don't know how well this will translate on YouTube live, but the lens is amazingly sharp, and I forget, let's see what I shot this one at. Okay. 1/320th at, I was probably at 440 millimeters, so I'm well below the reciprocal rule here, and it still looks, in my eyes, really sharp, and if you could see it locally, it's amazingly sharp. So I'm not sure, this one's not a great shot, but It's a bird in flight, same lens. I haven't really had any big issues with it. Here's another one, a bluebird. Let's see. 1/640th at 550, so not too bad there, but I found the lens to be really, really great. Yeah, that Canon 400mm, if you can afford it, would be a really good lens. I don't have a Canon body that I would shoot wildlife on, but being a Nikon shooter, that 200 to 500 is a lens if I was going to get something else that I would consider getting, but I don't have any reason to switch from the Sigma 150 to 600. It's just a great lens. And again, that's pretty much the only reason why I keep that D7100 around. If I want to shoot portraits or, urban, pretty much anything other than birds, I'll take my Fuji or my Sony cameras. When I go to Walt Disney World, which I go to a lot, I'll take usually my Fuji or my Sony with me, and I think it works really, really well for photos. Marco, Instagram is tough right now. I've had an Instagram following from local folks. I don't know, probably like 24 or 2,500 at my Bull City Pictures Instagram that I've grown over the years, but it's more of people who live in the RTP or the Triangle area in Raleigh and Durham, North Carolina, that enjoy looking at decent photos of the city. It's been really hard to grow. I don't know what it is. You have to be, I don't know what it is about Instagram. I'm not a big fan at this point. But yeah, if you don't follow people and get follow backs, then it seems like you don't grow. It's I'm not really happy with the state of Instagram these days. Yeah, Carbon, I can understand your frustration. If I find I shoot mine handheld mostly. I don't use a tripod, and I found the image stabilization to be great. The autofocus seems to be fine. I'm not sure exactly what it is that you're facing. Again, it could be a bad copy of the lens. But Marco, I would say, getting back to Instagram, try not to get trapped in the follow for follow crowd. It's I don't know. it seems a little, it's not dishonest, I guess. It's follow for follow, but try to do something unique. So if you're a regular guy that does a lot of tests, try to make them unique in some way. I don't know if anybody watches Camera Conspiracies, but Casey over there does things very uniquely. He doesn't have a lot of technical information. He doesn't have a lot of B-roll. He's not like a typical camera channel, but if you haven't checked out Camera Conspiracies, definitely check him out if you like comedy and cameras. But try to do something unique on Instagram. I don't know what that is because I post to Instagram. I posted recently because I was out yesterday doing some shooting in my town with a XT3 and the XH1, but I kind of given up on trying to grow Instagram. And Carbon, I haven't used the 7200. I have the 7100, which I still think holds up pretty well. You can see those shots were taken at ISO 400. I'd even go up to maybe 800 on that camera, but not much more. 7200 probably is a little better in lower light, but I think that D7000 series is pretty good from Nikon, especially for wildlife. So if you can get a good deal on a D7200, I would say definitely go for it. Like I said, I love my 7100. Great camera. Yeah, Carbon, there are a lot of bots, and I don't know if anybody here follows Brandon Vanson, but if you do follow him, or even if you don't, go check out his channel. He did a thing on Instagram and talks about kind of the state of the union, if you will, for Instagram. It's pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty spot on. There are a few ways that you can grow, but really the best way is to be unique and do something that nobody else is doing, which is pretty difficult in a photography market that's kind of oversaturated. Everybody having, cell phones and small point and shoots that they can take pictures of, which I think is great overall. But if you're trying to stand out as a photographer, I think it's much more difficult than it was maybe even 3 years or 4 years ago. And Carbon, I haven't looked at my Flickr account. I think I have one, but I haven't looked at that in quite a while. I haven't really been posting a lot of photos other than to Instagram and Twitter. I do have a 500px account. I do have a website for my photography side, which is Bull City Pictures, or bullcity.pictures. I have some of my work out there, but I really haven't been doing a lot. Sorry, a little cough there. Yeah, Carbon, if you can afford that D500, you definitely will not be disappointed, especially with that 200 to 500 lens. The problem is, once you invest in a system, it's really hard for a lot of reasons to switch. I kind of shoot, I guess, 3 systems, but that's just because I'm a bit of a camera geek. But primarily the Nikon is what I use for wildlife, that D7100, and then Fuji's I used kind of for urban / architectural photography. Anytime that I'm going around town, I'll do that. And then the Sonys are good. The A6500 and the A7 III are just good for almost anything, really. The problem with the Sony system is the lenses are crazy expensive. With Canon and Nikon, at least, you don't have to spend a ton of money to get really good lenses. Actually, I think Canon's better in that respect for inexpensive lenses. And speaking of Canon, this little beauty right here, it's the SX40. It's got a 40x zoom. I took this to Disney, and it's actually not a bad vlogging camera. You can see I've got a little dead cat type thing here. It's really not a bad vlogging camera. It does shoot 4K. That 40x zoom is actually pretty good. And the stabilization, I was surprised. I shot a Big Bad Voodoo Daddy concert on it, and yeah, it was shaky, and I was pretty far away. But by and large, the video looked pretty good. It was really low light, as most concerts are, but I was able to film that entire concert on this little $400 Canon point and shoot, which is a great travel camera. Little flip screen. I think it's not a bad deal at all. I am interested, Carbon, though, to see what Canon does with the RP, which is their new full frame camera that's supposed to be announced on Valentine's Day. Again, I'm not a Canon shooter. I do have some Canon lenses that I use on my Sony. I've got the 50mm 1.8, I've got the 24 to 105, I've got the 85mm, I've got the 10 to 18mm, so I do have some Canon lenses. But it'd be interesting to see what Canon does with that RP. If it's a low-priced full-frame camera, it'd be interesting. So you shoot architecture and landscape with the 6D. Yeah, I don't know a lot about the Canon bodies. I know the 6D2 didn't really get a lot of praise from critics and from YouTube reviewers. I don't know about the 7D. I've heard great things about the 7D. Again, I'm not really a Canon shooter, but I'm not against Canon. I just kind of bought into the Nikon system to begin with, and I have a fair amount of lenses. So other than the few lenses that I bought from Canon, which are fairly inexpensive. Oh, I've got the 70-200 f4 as well from Canon. But yeah, no, this Canon little point and shoot, the small sensor, it's $400 for this SX740. I actually, for $400, I think it's a good deal. I've got this Lumix, which is very similar camera, same sensor size. It's a 30x zoom, I think, something like that. But very similar to the Canon. They both shoot 4K. This one does RAW. The Canon doesn't. It's got some other features, but I do really like the Panasonic cameras. I've got a few Panasonic cameras as well. The G85 and GX85 are phenomenal cameras as far as stabilization goes. Just again, I don't have a ton of lenses to invest. That's really where you spend the money, is on the lenses. The bodies comparatively are fairly inexpensive considering you're buying maybe one or two bodies, but those lenses will definitely get you. And Carbon, I haven't looked at the mirrorless cameras. The M50, a lot of people are pushing it. It's funny with Canon. It seems like with the 6D2, with the M50, they released it thinking that it would do well organically, and it didn't. And then it seems like, and I don't know, it seems like all these YouTubers have renewed interest, however that might happen, in promoting these cameras. So recently the M50 and the 6D2 have kind of gotten a second wind, and you know, the M50 has that pretty severe crop in 4K with no dual pixel, and I love dual pixel, by the way. I have the SL2 just for the dual pixel and the flip out screen, a pretty good vlogging camera. But it seems like Canon might have their marketing machine working overtime for some of those cameras, like the M50, which is their smaller mirrorless, and the 6D2. The camera world is interesting in general, right? People were hoping that Sony would give the perfect vlogging camera with the a6400. It's a camera, right? And it's better than the a6300 and maybe in the a6500 in some ways, but there's never going to be a perfect camera. Bobby World, I agree. 4K is overrated today, but if you use it, you're future-proofing, and yeah, it's going to cost you more in storage, it's going to cost you more in memory cards, and really, how detailed do you want to get? Especially for vlogging, I think 4K is definitely overrated. Nobody wants to see my ugly mug, although I do my videos in 4K, and they can see every little piece of stubble and whatever on your face. You know, for vlogging, I agree 4K is definitely overrated. But I guess in some ways you're trying to future-proof it. Yeah, and Carbon, I don't know what's going on with Canon. They try to protect their cinema line, it seems like, by not putting real 4K in their DSLRs, and then their mirrorless cameras seem to be even less good with 4K from a specs perspective. So I don't know. I don't understand Canon, but there are rumors that they're looking to get out of the camera market. Probably not true, but they are definitely trying to protect their higher end, and I get that. Sony did that with the a6400 in a way. They didn't put IBIS or in-body stabilization in the 6400 because they wanted to protect the 6500, and I kind of get that. But these cameras seem to be all running together. Sony's supposedly going to be releasing the a7000. Who knows what that's going to be? Supposedly like a mini A7 III, but no flip out screen. So I don't know. If you're a vlogger, flip out screens definitely matter. You want to be able to add a microphone and flip that screen out. The A6400 didn't do that. So you can't use a microphone in the hot shoe and flip the screen out. I don't know. It's at some point you just have to decide what you want most and go with it, because there's never going to be a perfect camera released. Yeah, carbon. I don't know. I don't know what Canon's going to do. I am interested, like I said, in seeing what goes on with the RP. If that has flip-out screens, a full-frame camera, it's still going to use the new mount, so the lens selection isn't great, but you can get an adapter to use your EF, and I think EFS lenses on it. So, oh, Bobby, you have the M50. I don't know. We'll see what Canon does. I'm really interested to see what they do. They need to do something, because the EOS R is too expensive for what you get, and they really haven't been killing it. Yeah, maybe rest in peace, Canon. But Bobby World, the M50, like I said, I heard initially, the initial reviews were 4K crop, no dual pixel in 4K, it's garbage, the 720p, slow motion, blah, 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 blah. And then 6 months later, again, it seemed like the Canon marketing machine kicked in, and now the M50 is in favor. And I was just looking at it today, actually, because you can get the M50 body only for a little over $500, and you can get that Viltrox speed booster, which will reduce the focal length, so you can use EF lenses on the M50, which really sounds interesting. You can take that 50mm f1.8 if you have it, or any of your EF lenses, and use them, and they'll be roughly the same f-stop and focal length as they would be on a full-frame camera, and that seems pretty interesting to me. Oh, Bobby World, yeah, if you can get it the same price as the SL2, that was definitely a good deal. I still go back and forth about maybe picking one of those up. But what I'm waiting for, being a Fuji person, Fuji/Nikon, is the X-T30. I'm waiting to see if it actually has a flip-out screen. I've heard that it probably won't, but the X-T100 did, so I'm hoping maybe it does. I know the X-T3 does not, and usually the X-T2, the X-T20 kind of matched the X-T2 with lower specs, so they're assuming the X-T30 will kind of match the X-T3 with lower specs. But that's the camera I'm most excited about hearing right now, and that's supposed to come out or be announced on Valentine's Day as well. Carbon, I've only heard great things about that Nikon 200-500. I don't know if you watched Tony Northrup and his channel. He actually kind of got me started in photography, at least renewed my interest in photography, but he seems to rave about it, that and the D500 combo, and all of the reviews that I've seen on the 200-500 have been stellar. All the shots that I've seen have been really good. Of course, online people only post their best shots, so you're not going to see the cruddy shots, but that D500 and 200-500 Nikon seems to be just a killer combination for wildlife. Being that it's crop sensor, you get a little bit more reach than you would on the full frame, maybe 850, but yeah, I don't know if Canon's going to be able to come up with great wildlife bodies. I guess the 7D combined with some of those big, like 600mm Canon lenses, if you've got really deep pockets, do well. But for a reasonable price, I think sticking with Nikon and looking at that, I'm not sure how much that 200-500 lens is, but I think it's fairly reasonable. It's an f5.6, I believe, so it might be in the range of that, Sigma 150-600. And you might be able to sell that 150-600 if you don't plan on keeping it. You might be able to get maybe half of what you paid for it, which is not great, but it'll give you something to put down if you want to get that 200-500. Yeah, if you can wait for the 7D Mark III, let's see what happens. I don't know. Again, Canon has some of the best lenses available for really good prices. Their price ranges are crazy, obviously, just like I think Nikon's are, and Sony's even higher. But you look at things like the Canon 50mm f1.8, the 24mm if you've got a crop sensor 2.8 for $150. Even the 24 to 105 you can get for a fairly decent price. The 70 to 200 f4 is a really reasonable price. When you look at the f2.8 things, it kind of gets crazy, but Canon does have some really good glass. Oh. Yeah, I think if you're invested in one system, if you did your research initially, you probably went with that system for a reason. It's probably best to remember why you went with that system and then hang out. So Canon, I think Canon has always been behind Nikon in the megapixel war. And, say what you will about that. But in the great lens war, I think Canon's always had a slight lead over Nikon. And with their prices, again, I think you can't go wrong if you stick with Canon. You just have to find a body that works. The 7D3 might be it. You have to remember too, in a lot of cases, unless you're a pro, your camera's not necessarily going to make money for you. So you have to remember that too. And if you have the money to spend, that's great, and go ahead and get what you'd like. But whether it's necessary or not, I don't know. You got brainwashed. Yeah, that can happen. People in the camera world tend to be, I don't know how to put it, but they really, really like their manufacturers, it seems. Canon people really love Canon. Nikon people really love Nikon. I like what works for me. I started with Nikon because they were reasonable. They had more megapixels. They had a good lens selection. Their prices were reasonable. I started with Nikon, grew into Nikon, then kind of moved over to Fuji when the mirrorless stuff came out, and I've had a bunch of different Fuji cameras. I've bought and sold a bunch, but I think the current generation with the X-T3 and Fuji camera, for me, not being a vlogger, is pretty darn near perfect. The video is great, amazing. The lenses are great, and yes, they're expensive, but the photos are amazing as well. So for most of the stuff other than wildlife, I'm going to stick with Fuji. Fuji's too expensive for me for wildlife. I was just looking at their 100 to 400 lens. It's, I don't know, $1,700, $1,800, something crazy like that. Where that 100 to 500 Sigma was $900. Still not cheap, but. Yeah, the Fuji primes, they're good. This is only 1080, but the 16mm is filming me right now. And their prime lenses are good. They do have some lower prices, like a 35mm f2, there's a 23mm f2, a 50mm f2 around $400. So in the Fuji world, that's fairly inexpensive. The kit lens, which is 18 to 55, which is a lens I use a ton, is f2.8 to f4, is a great lens. I had it on the XT1 and the XT20. I never got the XT2, so I went from the XT1 to the XT3. But you take that XT3 with 18 to 55 and get a couple of primes, and you're in business for doing landscapes, architecture, even real estate. I've got the 10 to 24 lens on the Fuji, which is another great lens. So when I go out, I went out yesterday and I took the XH1 and I had the 16mm on it, and then I had the XT3 with the 10 to 24. And that pretty much covers everything that I want to do in that setting. But I don't own any. I mean, I bought my Fuji lenses used, so I don't own any really expensive lenses, but they can be, that 200mm Fuji prime is crazy expensive. I just, my photography is for fun. I can't justify spending thousands of dollars on a lens. But one of the reasons that I got into the Sony crop was for the Sigma lenses. And on my A6500 here, I've got the 16mm f1.4. They make a 30mm f1.4 and a 56mm f1.4, and they're all really, really good lenses. I think I've done reviews on all of them, maybe not the 30, but I do have reviews on the channel on the others, and that's one of the reasons I like the Sony crop sensors, because their Sigma lenses are fairly inexpensive compared to Sony. Yeah, I do have other Sigma lenses. I've got the 17-50 for the Canon. I've got the 17-50 for the Nikon. I've got the 10-20, which I used for kind of wide angle stuff. It's an older lens. The lenses that I just mentioned for the Sony, the 16mm, 30mm, and 56mm, I think they only make those for mirrorless, but Sigma these days makes really good lenses. The Sigma Art lens is great. It's big, and everything that I've seen, I don't have it, but all the reviews that I've seen, it's a stellar lens. I do actually have some Rokinon, and I think I've got an 85mm Rokinon for the, I think I've got it for my Nikon. It's a good lens. The Rokinon tend to be, I think they're making some, actually I have a 35mm autofocus lens, but they're starting to make some autofocus lenses, but primarily they were pretty high quality glass manual focus, which turns a lot of people off automatically. But yeah, Rokinon does make some pretty good lenses. And for Fuji, you're going to use Fuji lenses with the Fuji system. Fuji doesn't make lenses for anything other than the Fuji system. So, but the good thing about Fuji is, and one of the reasons I use Fuji when I go out and shoot, and especially I'm going to be shooting for Instagram, is because the JPEGs right out of the camera are really, really nice. Probably the nicest that I've seen. So I can take something that I've just shot and not have to worry about processing it and just upload it to Instagram or to Twitter, and the Fuji colors are really, really good. Oh. You live in Denmark? Is it cold there right now? It probably is, right? I'm in North Carolina, and it's probably 45 degrees Fahrenheit here, but yeah, I would imagine it's cold, although if you're going to do astrophotography, I guess the cold months are the best months to do it. Clearer skies and all of that. But I have that Rokinon 14mm as well for my Nikon, but I don't like the cold, so I tend not to get out to do astrophotography. Plus, if you live in the capital of Denmark or you live near a big city, you're probably not going to do a lot of astrophotography because there's too much noise pollution. So you kind of have to get outside of the city and you have to make that trip, and for me it's a bit of a hassle to do that. Although I do love it. I guess I'll just admire other people's photographs for astrophotography, and I'll walk around when it's warmer and do architecture and urban type shots, and then go to my backyard with a bird feeder and kind of shoot some birds, which is where I get almost all of my bird shots. But carbon, I would hold off and see what Canon does if you're invested in the lenses, even though you don't have necessarily a huge inventory of lenses. consider why you got into Canon, and then maybe see what happens with Canon in the future. Hopefully they release some good stuff. No, it's not cold, it's just cloudy. Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to shoot astro in the clouds. You do need some clear nights. And I grew up in the northeast of the US, up in New Hampshire, and we really had some clear nights. But again, in the wintertime there, if it's clear, it's cold. And I very strongly dislike cold. So like I said, I'll just enjoy others who want to get out there early or late and endure the cold. It's not for me. That 14mm lens is pretty much collecting dust. So I did put a link to a Discord server that I set up. If you're interested in chatting in a more interactive fashion, definitely check out that Discord server. It's kind of hard to do it through the comments. Carmen, I know you and I have been kind of chatting through the comments, and it's just not ideal. But if you want to jump over to Discord and check it out, I should be able to answer there quickly. They have a mobile version, so whenever I get a message, I'll be able to check that out and should be able to respond. That's probably going to be the best way. Yeah, Carbon, it's difficult. Just like with computers, you can wait forever, really. Or you can just say, all right, this is good enough. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to start here. And then realize that in 2 years, regardless of which camera you buy, it's going to be considered obsolete or old or whatever the case may be. That's just the way technology is. But at some point you have to jump in and just start. And the 7D 2 or 3, or I don't know. I can't advise you because I tend to do both. Sometimes I'll wait and get a good deal on a last generation camera, and sometimes I want the latest. Like with the Fuji X-T3, I skipped the X-T2 and waited for the X-T3. So also check out KEH. Actually, if you're in Denmark, I don't know if they ship over there. There's some good places where you can get used gear, at least in the US. I'm not sure about Denmark, but I always check out the used market. The 16mm lens that we're filming on here, I bought used. You know, it's a $900 lens or $1,000 lens, and I think I got it for $700 or something like that. I bought a lot of used gear. I think used gear, especially lenses, if you can buy from a reputable source, definitely check those out. Camera bodies, it's tough. I don't know. They can look at them and evaluate them and rank them, but I think camera bodies take a lot of abuse. And I'm less likely to buy a camera body used than I would be a lens. Hey, howdy, hey! Sony. So is that a Sony A7 II, I think? For night photography, I think that's a great camera. The A7 III, which I haven't used for night photography, but it's probably A7S II, right? Yeah, the S series is pretty darn good for low light. If you want to move up to the next version of that, the A7S III, potentially, but the A7 III really does good in low light. I think I've used that up to like ISO 6400 with what I consider to be pretty acceptable results. It's definitely not as expensive as the S series of cameras for Sony. Yeah, Carbon, definitely look at used gear. There's always some risk, but if you buy from a reputable company, you'll get a warranty and the risk is mitigated a little bit there. But yeah, if you can get that Canon 400mm at a good price, that's definitely going to serve you well. Obviously with a prime though, you kind of have to move a little bit compared to the zoom, but if you're okay with that, I think that's a good choice. Yeah, and hey howdy hey, the A7S II is a great camera for video and for photos in low light. I don't know, we're just talking about upgrading, and I know if you're a camera geek like I am, you always have that bug of, I should upgrade, this tech is better, that tech is better, it's going to make my photos better. But then again, you have to weigh it against your budget, and if you're not making a living with your camera, do you really need to upgrade? And again, I shouldn't talk because I've got a ton of cameras here, although many of them weren't upgrades. They were just new purchases. But I have sold some stuff too. So I think the A7S II is still a great camera. The autofocus system, you know, is compared to the newer generations is not as good, but the low light performance is still good. I think it's more important to invest in good glass. And if you're shooting night stuff, I don't know what you have for lenses, but 16-35 f 2.8, 24-70 2.8, those types of lenses will do pretty well for you. If you want to do some astrophotography, you know, you might consider a more specialized, wider lens than the 16-35, but Sony lenses are, and we were just talking about this a little while ago, in my mind are expensive, and that's why for my Sony APS-C cameras, I've got the A6500. I use the Sigma lenses primarily, the 16mm, 30mm, and 56mm f1.4, and they're really good lenses. Yeah, Carbon, we all love to have sharp photos, especially of wildlife. But I also think that sometimes, I know that I personally put too high a value on sharpness. It is great, and when you can nail it, it's great, but it's difficult. The closer you can get to your subject, the more sharpness you'll have regardless of the lens, right? But with wildlife, you can't. A lot of times if you've got a 400mm lens, you're kind of at the end of that, and it's not going to be as sharp as if it's shot at 100 or 200. And that's why I like the 150-600, is I can dial it into 300 or 400, and then if I need to get a little extra, I can do that, but try to shoot at 300, 400. You'll get better, sharper pictures than if you shoot at 600. So it's just a matter of getting close, and that's really the key with wildlife, which is obviously difficult. But if you really, really want good, sharp photos, even with lenses that aren't considered sharp, get close and you'll get good, sharp photos in good light like we talked about earlier. And hey howdy hey, you might consider, if you're doing night photography, depending on what you're doing, you might consider a crop sensor. That A6500 with that 16mm, which is a 24mm equivalent, with that 16mm f1.4 Sigma lens, man, that's pretty hard to beat. And the A6400 is probably going to be coming down in price, even though the A6400 is not considered a competitor. It's newer, and you might see the A6500 drop in price a bit. Yeah, Carbon, it would be nice if Nikon and Canon combined in the future and they made universal gear, but that's certainly not going to happen. And you can't use Nikon lenses on Canon and vice versa. And that's one of the reasons why I like mirrorless. So if you get a mirrorless camera, you can use a lot of the DSLR lenses. Sometimes you won't get autofocus. But with my Fuji system, I did a review on this. There's a Fringer, I think it's called Fringer, adapter that you can buy with Canon lenses. You'll be able to use it and get autofocus and get all the EXIF data and do all that. So for my Fuji, because their lenses are so expensive, the 40-150, I think it is, which is like their 70 to 200 equivalent, is crazy expensive, almost $2,000. So I bought that Fringer adapter, which I think was around $200 or $300, and then I got this Canon 70 to 200, and I got the Canon 85mm f1.8, and they work really well. Not as well as they would natively on a Canon camera, but they still work really well. So I can take those less expensive, comparatively less expensive lenses from Canon and use them on my Fuji and get very, very good results. Especially portrait lenses, you don't necessarily worry about things that are fast moving. So I'm really happy with the results of those Canon lenses on the Fuji system. Yeah, carbon, a step closer is always going to be good. And again, I shoot most of my bird stuff in my yard, and I've got a feeder, and the birds are fairly used to humans here, so it's easy for me to say that. But if I were out in the field and trying to shoot hawks or eagles or birds of prey that generally aren't going to get too close to you, I know that that's pretty difficult. I can hear this Canon. Sorry, I can hear this Sony camera trying to autofocus. I'll just turn that one off. But this was good. It actually went a lot longer than I expected. I'll probably call it in about 5 minutes here. So if you have any last questions, let me know. I hope the audio and video were working out again. I've got the Fuji X-T3 with that 16mm f1.4 lens. Got the Rode wireless microphone here. I think I did some tests that sound pretty good, but hopefully everything looks and sounds good. Yeah, so Carbon, I actually considered some of the Sigma art lenses. What I was trying to do was find a good video lens, a good video Canon mount Sigma lens that I could use on my Fuji. The problem with the Sigma lenses is they tend to be loud or too loud to use for video if you're going to be putting a microphone on or near the camera. But from a quality perspective, I think the Sigma art lenses rival the Canon L lenses. And again, so for Canon, I've got the 50mm f1.8, got the 85mm 1.8, got the 70 to 200 f4, I've got the 24 to 105, that's like a 3.5 to 5.6. And I think that covers a lot of what I would want to do with Canon. And then I used, again, the Nikon for the longer stuff. But I do like that combination of Fuji and Canon lenses. Hey, howdy, hey. Yeah, the Theta camera, I don't know if they've got a new version coming out soon. I know there's a lot of VR or 360 cameras making news these days, and I've got a LG 360 camera. I think until we can talk about, it sounds crazy, but until we can talk about 8K cameras because of the round field of view, I think we're probably not going to get to where we want to be. But I don't know about the Theta cameras, if they have a new version coming out. I haven't really followed the 360 or VR stuff all that closely. But I'm sure that, if it's only that every year, probably they'll have a new version coming out. No, Carbon, ask away. That's why we have these live chats. Don't feel bad. Hopefully I can answer your questions or at least give you some idea. And no, you're not annoying at all. I appreciate it. I know, hey, howdy, hey, those 360 cameras they're pretty awesome at Disney World, which is primarily where I would use them. And although I'm not close, I do go there often enough to have me think about cameras that I would use there. And I used that LG camera there once or twice, and you can get some pretty interesting effects. I think you probably know of our buddy Josh from Resort TV 1. I think he did a 360 fireworks show. I haven't seen that one yet, but Disneyland. Yeah, Disneyland is another good place. But I'm interested to see what the newer versions of the cameras can do. The 360 cameras or VR cameras. I think some of them have the 5.7K sensors now. I think once we get up to 6 or 8K, I think we'll be in pretty good shape, and you get an image that is pretty good quality. The issue is, I like to watch stuff on my television, and as it stands right now, especially on YouTube, you can't see VR on your TV. You have to be on the computer, which I could fire up the computer and watch it on my television as well, but I think there's still some technology that needs to be in place before it can be mainstream. Yeah, Carbon, if you're looking for a good street lens, that 50mm Sigma is going to be phenomenal. It might be a little too tight though. I would look at the difference between the 35 and the 50, depending on whether you're using it on a crop or a full frame. If you've got a full frame at 50, that's probably okay, but definitely a crop at 50 might be a little bit tight. So look into, either way, I'd check out the 35mm Sigma as well and see. And just, I don't have any reviews on them. I don't own either of those. But if you're not concerned about weight, then, or image stabilization, then definitely check out the 35mm as well. All right, we're going to give it another minute or two. Any last questions? Oh, Carbon, the 60 is a crop sensor, I think, right? So yeah, so that's with the 1.6 crop, it's like an 80mm, I think, something like that. I can't do the math at the moment, but yeah, I would still take a look at that 35mm. Hey, howdy, hey, no, I actually never got into film. Believe it or not, my first camera was a Sony Mavica, which used 3.5-inch floppies. If you remember film, you probably remember those. But no, I never got into film. I started with digital. Although film does seem intriguing, it seems a little bit expensive, considering what you can do with digital and shoot and not have to worry about trying to develop. I would like to try it one time, though. Well, thanks guys, I appreciate it. I'm going to call this one. Thank you so much for all the questions. Thank you for your attention. I'll try to do these fairly regularly. I haven't done this in a while. I've been trying to focus on making produced videos, but I think I'm going to do more of these live streams. We'll see how it goes. I might put this one up. It depends. I'll watch it and see if it's worthy, if I think anybody would be interested in it. But thank you again for the questions. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And check out the Discord. There's a link in the description for this video. If you want to join me on Discord, we can talk more about, pretty much any time we can talk more about cameras and video and YouTube and all that other good stuff. So thanks for joining. Get out there and have your photo gear fun, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thanks so much.